There's a common discourse in the Yu-Gi-Oh community regarding deck building where specific inclusions in decks are either regarded as correct or incorrect, and I think this discourse is often misused. For example, although Brain, Heavy, and MST are staples included in nearly every deck, there are also decks such as Yugioh with so much innate spot removal in the engine, as well as an emphasis on having suitable mills, that there's a reason not to include spell cards that clear back row in the main deck. Decks such as Hero Beat opt out of brain control due to small amounts of conversions, despite the power that brain control has. And this isn't to say that there's no such thing as correct and incorrect choices in deck building. I personally would say it is almost definitely wrong not to include brain control in a frog deck due to the sheer large amount of conversions present in frogs. But ultimately, my point is just that deck building isn't falsifiable to a correct and incorrect decision for many individual choices. And no card in the current meta exemplifies this more than Nobleman of Crossout. NoC is a card that I've been recommended by numerous strong duelists in the past, such as Aris, and it's becoming increasingly popular since Yondaime won Peak 3 with 3 NoCs on the side. However, I've personally decided against playing it because it's a unique side deck choice in the sense that it's almost paradoxical. It's a card that is extremely high impact when it resolves. Take the rise of multiple hamster decks, such as Christia, Vayu, or Machina. If you successfully knock either the hamster or the Raikou, the game becomes substantially simplified. The first reason is that it streamlines all of the set monsters to either be the other card that you haven't knocked, making it very safe to swing into set cards, or two is that it removes a large portion of what makes a deck function. For example, Vayu decks typically depend on Raikou for spot removal. Raikou and Caius was a secondary engine applied to the Vayu deck for it to circumvent problems that typical beaters like vanilla 2300 monsters would struggle against, such as recruiters, or just spot removal like Deep Prison and Bottomless. A huge part of the conflict playing against Raikou decks is knowing when to set your back row, because if you don't set your back row, the secondary engine will do a ton of damage to you, such as Greffer Armdwayne doing 4000 or just Gearframe Fortress doing 43. But if you knock one of the targets, you can defend to play against the rest of the deck, so it no longer becomes dangerous to set Prison or set Bottomless into a potential Raikou, although you still have to worry about cards such as Heavy, MST, and potentially Dust. And then the third reason is if you knock the Raikou, it effectively makes every single hamster in the deck a dead draw since it becomes an 1800 defense vanilla. Depending on what deck you're playing, that could actually still be a minor problem. For example, fairies actually do not have any offensive pressure against a hamster, but generally every strong deck in the format will not struggle with a vanilla 1800 defense monster. So the upside to resolving NoC is clearly very powerful, but the issue is that NoC is a card you want to draw in the early game. This is because each independent Raikou and hamster has value, so if you knock the subsequent Raikous or subsequent hamsters after you draw the NoC, if you draw it in the mid game, the resolved Raikous and hamsters have already established the pressure of the early game, which often includes tempo and damage, if not value trades and mills. The second reason is if they've already resolved Raikous and hamsters that they opened, or you open NoCs and they don't draw their flip monsters at all, then you might be left drawing a dead card, which is playing the entire game at functional -1 value, which is obviously horrible because all the good decks in the format are just not going to lose if you're missing a card the entire game. So now you get into a conundrum where if you play 1 to 2 NoCs because you only need to resolve 1 to 2 NoCs in a game ever, then you have a 15% chance for 1 NoC or a 28% chance for 2 NoCs compared to the 57.71% chance that they open one of their flips in a 5 flip deck, or 65% chance in a 6 flip deck. So this isn't accounting for math that deck specific draw cards like Allure or Solar Recharge do to make the odds better for opening their flips. But now it's just a problem because it's like, do you play all 3 NoCs have a 39.43% chance of opening it? Like, it'll crush the flip opens, but then you have additional problems, such as one, having less sideboard space, and also having the issue of drawing the additional dead NoCs when you play multiple. But if you play fewer copies, then you just don't draw them when you need them, so it just becomes a complicated issue of what ratio of Noblemans that you need to side. And now these problems are too severe for me to justify citing NoC. The issue is that I've never been very impressed with Raikou as a card in general. And part of it is my bias against random milling. Like, just as a player, I detest the information random milling gives to your opponent. I don't like high variance in my gameplay. And that's also why I tend to gravitate towards hero decks with consistent searching. But regardless, bias aside, I do think that people who frequently lose to Raikou are almost always making poor decisions against Raikou decks. That tends to be a rather consistent theme I'm finding from replays. And this could just be committing important back row when it's not necessary for the early game, or just not knowing how to trade efficiently into Raikou, and that can really just be fixed with tighter technical play. Still, I've personally never really found Raikou to be a severe problem. So ultimately, I'm not saying whether you should or shouldn't side NoC. I don't think there's a right or wrong decision regarding this card, and the answer is most likely determined by the metagame you expect at the tournament you're attending, whether it's your locals or just some online event. So Yeah, I just wanted to make this quick video to present some information about NoC that I find rather interesting and also applies to any card that just try to hit starters and nothing more in a deck. But that's about it. See ya.